Did you know that Mexican drug cartels are targeting America's last best place? Yes, you heard it right. Montana, a state renowned for its tranquility, wide open spaces, and natural beauty, has been under an alarming invasion. This invasion isn't from aliens or foreign military forces, but from something much more insidious: Mexican drug cartels. These cartels, with their sophisticated operations and relentless strategies, have been flooding Montana with dangerous drugs, particularly methamphetamine and fentanyl. These substances are not only causing damage to the lives of the individuals who consume them, but are also ripping apart the fabric of communities throughout the state. What's even more concerning is the cartel's strategic targeting of Montana's Indian reservations. These areas, known for their relative isolation and scarcity of law enforcement, have become hotspots for cartel activity. It's a cruel exploitation of a vulnerable population and a gross violation of the sanctity of these reservations. This is not just a random act of drug peddling. It's a carefully orchestrated plan by the cartels to expand their operations into new territories. By infiltrating these remote areas in Montana, they have found a way to increase their profits manifold, selling these destructive substances at prices many times higher than what they could fetch closer to the border. The cartels have not just infiltrated Montana, they have invaded it, turning the state into a battleground in the ongoing war against drugs. This invasion has transformed Montana from being America's last best place into a state grappling with a drug crisis of unprecedented proportions. Yet, despite these alarming developments, Montana is not backing down. From local communities to law enforcement agencies, the state is fighting back, striving to reclaim its tranquility and natural beauty from the clutches of these cartels. This invasion of Montana is not just a random act, but a carefully orchestrated plan by the Mexican drug cartels. And as we delve deeper into this issue, we will uncover the intricate workings of this invasion and the brave efforts being made to counteract it. On the evening of March 17, 2020, a former Mexican police officer named Ricardo Ramos Medina stepped onto American soil, not as an immigrant, but as a drug trafficker for the Sinaloa cartel. His journey began in Tijuana, where he left his hotel room and crossed the border into Southern California at a few minutes past 10. His first stop, San Diego International Airport. Not to catch a flight, but to pick up a rental car, a white Jeep Compass to be exact. His next destination was a clandestine meeting spot where a female drug mule awaited him with a grocery sack filled to the brim with methamphetamine. However, the night was still young for Medina. Ahead of him lay a much longer journey, an arduous 16-hour drive to Montana. This wasn't his first time making the trip. He knew the route like the back of his hand. But, as they say, even the best-laid plans often go awry. And this time, things didn't go as smoothly as Medina had hoped. Before he could reach Butte, Montana, his journey came to an abrupt halt. State and federal officers pulled him over. Inside his Jeep, they discovered approximately 2 pounds of pure methamphetamine. To put that into perspective, that's enough to supply the entire town of Townsend, Montana, with a population of 2,150 for multiple days. Medina's arrest wasn't just another notch on the belt for law enforcement. It was the first step in unraveling a sinister web of drug trafficking that had been silently spreading its venom across Montana for years. Federal prosecutors would later reveal that this drug ring had funneled at least 2,000 pounds of meth and 700,000 fentanyl-laced pills into Montana from Mexico over a span of 3 years. This arrest was not just about one man, but about cracking open a drug trafficking ring that had been poisoning Montana for years. Why Montana? The answer boils down to one thing: money. As the saying goes, follow the money, and you'll find the motives. And in this case, the money trail leads straight to the seemingly serene and tranquil landscapes of Montana. But why Montana? What makes this state a lucrative target for Mexican drug cartels? You see, it's all about supply and demand combined with the high profit margins that come with scarcity. In urban centers closer to the border, drugs are relatively easy to come by. This availability keeps prices low, and the profits, while steady, are not particularly high. However, in the more remote areas of Montana, the situation is starkly different. Here, drugs are harder to come by. making them a rare and therefore highly sought-after commodity. This scarcity drives up the prices and, with it, the profit margins. The demand for these drugs, particularly on Indian reservations, is unfortunately high. In these areas, drugs have become a form of escape for some from the harsh realities of life. This high demand, coupled with the scarcity of supply, creates a perfect storm for drug cartels to exploit. And exploit they do, with ruthless efficiency and a chilling disregard for the human cost. Cartel associates have been known to sell pills in Montana for up to 20 times the price they would fetch in urban centers closer to the border. When you consider the sheer volume of drugs they're moving, the potential profits are astronomical. By pushing more aggressively into Montana, the cartels have tapped into a wellspring of profit that shows no signs of drying up. And as long as the demand exists, and law enforcement struggles to keep up, these cartels will continue to flood Montana with drugs, reaping massive profits at the expense of the vulnerable. In essence, the cartel's aggressive push into Montana is driven by the promise of massive profits that come at an enormous human cost, leaving a trail of addiction, crime, and despair in their wake. The impact of the drug influx on Indian reservations in Montana has been devastating. The surge in illegal narcotics has precipitated a corresponding rise in crime and drug overdoses, casting a long, ominous shadow over these communities. The tribal lands of Montana, once steeped in the tranquility of isolation, are now awash with drugs. The tranquility has been replaced by a sense of unease, a sense of fear. The once close-knit communities are now dealing with an enemy that is both invisible and incredibly destructive. Cartels, in their relentless pursuit of profit, have shown a terrifying adaptability, exploiting the vulnerabilities of these communities to establish a foothold. Indigenous women, the lifeblood of these communities, have been targeted. Lured by false promises or coerced by fear, they are drawn into the dark underbelly of the drug trade, serving as a bridge between the cartels and the reservations. But the exploitation does not stop there. Native Americans, the guardians of these lands, are being manipulated into becoming unwilling participants in this illicit trade. Cartels, with their insidious tactics, give them an initial supply of drugs, free of cost. This gift is nothing more than a trap, a hook that pulls them into the vortex of addiction. Once addicted, they find themselves indebted to the cartels, becoming pawns in this deadly game. The cartels have not just introduced drugs into these communities. They have brought with them a wave of violence and fear. They have disrupted the social fabric, turning neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. The impact is not just physical, it's psychological. It's a trauma that resonates through generations, a wound that refuses to heal. The Indian reservations of Montana are under siege, not from an external enemy, but from a threat that lurks within, hidden in plain sight. The cartels are not just selling drugs, they are infiltrating and destabilizing communities, leaving behind a trail of destruction that will take years, if not decades, to repair. Policing a state as vast as Montana is no easy task. The sheer size of the state, coupled with its remote and often rugged terrain, presents a unique set of challenges for law enforcement. When you factor in the onslaught of illegal drugs, especially in the more secluded areas, the task becomes even more daunting. One of the most critical hotspots for this illicit trade is on the Indian reservations. Here, tribal leaders report a surge in crime and drug overdoses. The issue is not only the influx of drugs, but also the lack of resources to combat it. Tribal police forces are often underfunded and understaffed, struggling to keep pace with the escalating problem. These limitations have led to some desperate measures. On one reservation, tribe members formed a vigilante group to fight drug-related crime. It's a stark reminder of the lengths these communities are willing to go to protect themselves. But vigilantism is a double-edged sword. While it may bring temporary relief, it doesn't address the root of the problem, the unrelenting flow of drugs from Mexico. The wide-open spaces of Montana also pose a significant challenge. With law enforcement spread thin across the state, it becomes easier for illegal activities to slip through the cracks. This vastness, coupled with the state's proximity to the Canadian border, makes it an attractive route for drug traffickers. Then there's the issue of jurisdiction. On Indian reservations, law enforcement can be a complex web of tribal, state, and federal authorities. This can lead to bureaucratic red tape, slowing down investigations and prosecutions. Yet, despite these hurdles, Montana's law enforcement is not backing down. They understand that this is not a battle that can be won overnight. It requires patience, resilience, and a commitment to safeguarding their communities. They're on the front lines, doing their best to intercept the drugs before they reach the streets and wreak havoc on their towns and cities. Despite the challenges, Montana authorities are not backing down. The arrest of Medina was a major victory in the fight against drug trafficking in Montana. This former Mexican police officer, now a foot soldier for the Sinaloa cartel, was caught red-handed with 2 pounds of pure methamphetamine, enough to supply the entire town of Townsend, Montana, for several days. But the significance of Medina's arrest extends far beyond the confiscation of illicit substances. It was the thread that, once pulled, started to unravel a vast, intricate tapestry of criminality. The subsequent investigation led to the exposure of a drug trafficking ring that had funneled at least 2,000 pounds of meth and 700,000 fentanyl-laced pills from Mexico to Montana over a span of 3 years. Why is that so significant? Each of these pills and each ounce of this meth represented potential devastation for Montana families, potential profits for the cartels, and potential erosion of the social fabric of the state's communities. The arrest of Medina and the subsequent crackdown disrupted this devastating cycle. Following the arrest, Montana authorities did not rest on their laurels. They pressed on, their resolve stiffened. In the months that followed, they made significant inroads into the drug trafficking network. 21 other members of the drug trafficking ring tied to the Sinaloa cartel were ensnared in a massive bust. Furthermore, since last April, 26 suspects have been charged in a second federal drug case involving Mexican cartels. Each arrest, each charge represents a small victory in the fight against the drug trade. But more than that, they serve as a stark reminder of the pervasive threat posed by the cartels. They underscore the ongoing challenge faced by law enforcement in Montana and the resilience required to combat it. In conclusion, Medina's arrest was more than just an isolated incident. It was a turning point. It was a signal to the cartels that Montana was not going to be their playground. It served as a beacon of hope for the communities ravaged by the drug epidemic. Medina's arrest was a crucial step in the ongoing battle against the Mexican drug cartel's invasion of Montana. The battle against the Mexican drug cartels in Montana is far from over. The infiltration of these powerful criminal organizations into the heartland of America, specifically the state of Montana, continues to be a pressing concern. The stakes are high. The cartels are not only flooding our communities with dangerous substances like fentanyl and methamphetamine, but they're also exploiting vulnerabilities in our society. They've targeted our Indian reservations, where law enforcement resources are scarce, and they've woven their destructive webs into the fabric of these communities. The journey of Ricardo Ramos Medina, a former Mexican police officer turned cartel operative, provides a chilling glimpse into the sophisticated operations of these cartels. His story is a stark reminder of the lengths these organizations will go to in order to maximize their profits. The fact that Montana, with its remote locations and high drug prices, has become a prime target for these operations is a testament to their relentless pursuit of profit. The impact on Indian reservations is particularly devastating. The cartels are exploiting the lack of law enforcement and the vulnerability of the indigenous population to establish their operations. The rise in crime and overdoses on these reservations is a direct result of this ruthless invasion. However, while the situation is dire, it's not hopeless. Law enforcement in Montana, despite the challenges of policing such a vast state, has made significant headway. The arrest of Medina and the subsequent dismantling of a major drug trafficking ring linked to the Sinaloa cartel is a clear victory. But it's just one battle in a larger war. The fight against the cartels requires continued vigilance. It calls for robust law enforcement, increased funding for tribal police forces, and a consistent focus on dismantling these criminal networks. It's a complex task, but it's vital for the safety and well-being of Montana's residents and for the preservation of America's last best place. As the fight against the cartels continues, Montana remains America's last best place, but for how long?